Hello, everybody, and welcome to Motion Design Hotline Pirate Feed. That's right, we're on
R.
Avast. Ahoy! Chips Challenge. So, Kyle, we are back on the Motion Design Hotline here where we solve people's After Effects problems, you and I.
Oh, is that what this is?
Sometimes. I mean, sometimes we create problems. Is what
I don't think that's true.
Problematic fave Motion Design Hotline. And hello there. Man, I'm gonna screw up everybody's name. I'm gonna say Sharma. Let me know if I do good pronunciation ever. But yeah, we are on Behance. We are on YouTube.
All of the YouTubes.
Yeah,
every single one of them.
Each tube is full of our stuff. Umacorn, hey, what's going on? Oh, is that a new icon, Umacorn? I think maybe. It's like noticing when someone has a new haircut. So yeah, we are, as I say, we're on Behance on the EC Abrams stream, but we're also on YouTube. So if you enjoy YouTube, we have our own channel over there. Kyle, how do people find these?
Our own
things?
channel? Wow, yeah.
Our very own.
Our central hub of things is the very easily titled motiondesignhotline.com, and that will take you to the other places.
Yeah.
But if you want to find us on YouTube, we are Motion Design Hotline.
Yeah, all one word.
Yep.
Over there.
Well, it's got spaces.
Oh.
I mean, it's probably, I don't know. Just go to motiondesignhotline.com and you'll find us. If you're already watching us on YouTube, maybe you should tell us what it is.
Yeah, that's right. Michael Montoya, you let us know. But yeah, so today we are going to be going back into data, turning numbos into pictos, which is our favorite thing to do. I mean, everything in After Effects is represented by properties, so all pictos are numbos over there. So hopefully that'll be good.
I don't know that you're clearing anything up right now.
Listen, all pictures are numbers. I'm not going to be taking too many questions about this stuff. But yeah,
let's do so last week we showed a variety of different sort of graphs and charts and ways that you can use the numbers that you might get from a spreadsheet, for example, and turn it into an animated chart. And we explored a couple different builds for that. And those tend to be a little expression-y because you're linking a lot of properties. So if anyone did watch last week and you have questions about anything that we covered, please ask and we'll dive deeper today. If you have questions about any of that stuff in general, please ask and we'll do our best to answer it.
If there's like a favorite type of chart that you've been wanting to make and you just haven't been able to crack it, let us know. We can fumble through it live. Yeah, and these things usually turn into templates, right? Like they turn into a type of temperature, so you can just swap out the data and get on with it. And so we can get on with it. I'll just say hi to some of the other people in the chat. Brooke, what's going on? And to who? Hello. So welcome everyone. Anyone watching this, if you're within the sound of my voice, let me know what you're doing, where you're from. We love to know where we are reaching in the world. But Kyle, you had some interesting tidbits. We might as well start with you, and we can kind of kick the ball back and forth here. So you had your stuff open already. We're going to go to you because you had the files open on your screen.
That's fair.
So maybe just back up and show the whole version of the thing. Then we'll get into the nitties and gritties.
So I made just a real basic pie chart last week here. And again, kind of dug into the way that that's built, the way that that's rigged so that you can make these wedges be actually like aware of the previous wedges and sort of offset themselves appropriately. There's a couple different ways that you can do this kind of stuff. And then, of course, as part of making the promo for last week's episode, I opted to talk about one of the more ridiculous episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation, because that seemed like a good thing to depict on this chart. And we could probably spend half today's episode talking about this episode if we wanted to. Yeah. I'll just throw in a quick tidbit that has no relation to the rest of it. That the planet that they're orbiting, which has nothing to do with the rest of the episode, they just name drop it at the beginning of the episode. They're orbiting a planet called Deinonychus 7. Which is a type of it's a type of dinosaur that I have tattooed on my arm. So I thought that was a nice little tidbit.
That's
Coincidence?
I want to
Sure.
know who gets in Star Trek in the Federation. Who gets to name planets? Because I guarantee you, the people from that planet don't call it that. That is that's 100%. That is 100% like, um, yeah, calling
Honestly, if I had a planet, I might name it Deinonychus 7.
for sure. Yeah, then people can orbit around it. What kind of dinosaur is a Deinonychus? Is that a
Well, okay. I mean, here we're already way off track.
sure?
So the what you think of as velociraptors from Jurassic Park,
Yes.
that's really a Deinonychus because a
Oh.
velociraptor is that, but only about 2.5 to 3 feet tall.
Okay, good. Finally setting the
But
record straight.
yeah, Michael Crichton thought it sounded cooler, so he changed it for the book and thus for
Well,
the
yeah, like
screenplay.
it's got a bunch of angular letters and mouth
Hmm.
sounds.
Yeah,
Velociraptor. Oh my gosh,
yeah.
it's terrifying.
It's fast and deadly. Like that's a
Yeah.
good name.
Unlike Deinonychus. Like Deinonychus sounds like a hungry Roman, you know? Deinonychus demands circuses. So that's
Although I do think, someone please correct me. I might mix this up off the top of my head, but pretty sure Deinonychus means terrible claw, which is
hmm.
pretty awesome in itself. But you know, it just doesn't. It's not as overt about it.
No, you have to look it up, which we do not
Yeah.
like doing. But anyway, this is about graphs. So
These are data points we should have somehow depicted.
right. Oh,
Um,
and
yep.
Michael's got a real question though. So our stalling for time has really netted us some good stuff. Um, So, how do you deal with large amounts of data from spreadsheets? For
Mhm.
example, if I pull in a large data set and I want to, there's a heart icon in my way. Come on.
Yeah.
Why? Why would the
I hate that icon. Yeah,
interface
if
be
I
like
pull
this?
in a large data set and I want to loop through all the rows in After Effects, it basically kills my projects. I'm assuming this is a question about performance
Oh, perhaps.
then.
Yeah. Um,
That's how I'm interpreting that.
If you have to loop through all of the rows, I guess the trick
I,
is you don't want to reference all of the rows. You only want to reference certain rows, right?
well, I mean, so I have a client project I'm working on right now, which unfortunately I can't show, and I don't have a generic version of it, but it has a table, and so it's like a 9 by 6 table,
Okay.
with a bunch of details in there, and
Hmm.
I do feel that pull a little bit. I set it up to pull from a spreadsheet specifically because I thought that would be a little easier to tweak because I had it filled with like dummy info at the
Mm,
beginning and I knew we'd be filling it out with real info as the project progressed.
right.
Um, yeah, honestly, I mean, I think that's kind of the reality of it.
Mm.
I've been using a CSV, so I don't know if it would be more performative if you were pulling from, say, a JSON, for example. Um,
Yeah. Hold
I
on.
mean,
You
ultimately, you have a lot of expression links set up, even though they're simple. Um, Go ahead
yeah.
if you have something to
No,
add.
I was gonna say you get into your thing, and then I'm gonna see if I have a CSV around because I want to try to
I mean, I've
show.
got one of these rigged up to it.
Well, okay. So the thing that I wanted to say is like when you drop the CSV onto your timeline,
Hmm.
right? It's really just creating a layer with a whole bunch of things that are holding the data, right?
Yep.
So if you go to one of those and you twirl into those, you see these numbers are all red, right? And that's
Hmm.
because they're all expressions. But all of those expressions are really just telling you the address that it's looking at in
Yeah.
the footage. So we actually don't need to drag that onto the timeline. You can just copy and paste that expression
Correct.
into the places you're going to be looking at it. Now, if you did that, you would be cutting down the number of expressions being evaluated in half, basically, right? Because
Correct. Personally, I would always put this in my
mm,
timeline to make sure that it gets collected with the project.
yeah, 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 wise,
But you could potentially cut out that step of yeah, you would kind of like save one stop on that little data trip. I don't know if that would be faster. It would
mm.
definitely be a little less smooth to set up.
Yeah, and oh yeah, and Michael's asking about let's see, they've not tried JSON to
Mhm.
compare. I feel like JSON is actually going to be the heavier of the two
I
between
would think so too.
and
And I
CSV.
like this idea of possibly trying posterize times 0 to only calculate things once. I think Don't quote me on this. And sometimes we actually have some of the After Effects team watching. So if one of them is in the audience, they can tell me I'm wrong. But I do believe that that trick used to absolutely make sense. I think that with some of the revisions to the way that things process, that's no longer necessary.
Hmm. Right, because it shouldn't be doing redundant calculations if nothing has changed about the thing.
Right.
So who knows? Maybe the problem has been solved while we haven't been looking at it. So yeah, I don't know. So yeah, my idea is always to like just cut out. What is posterized time 0?
Great question.
So posterized time, just generally,
I'll make a demo.
Yeah. So like the posterized time effect, I think we all know, right? That's going to say whatever the frame rate of this thing is, I'm only interested in like make it seem like it's going 8 frames a second, make it seem like it's going 24, make it seem like it's going 1 frame per second. Expressions are evaluated on every frame. Just as a general idea, if you've written, say, wiggle 520 or whatever, then we are evaluating that every frame. So frame 1, 2, 3, 4, we are running the math. We're doing our long divisions every time. Mm-hmm. If you put posterized time and then something in that argument, we're saying how often should you be actually evaluating this expression? So similar to the effect on footage, this is having the effect. And what if you put it on here? What are you
right, exactly. So I was kind of letting you cover the theory here, and then I'll talk through this. So I just made some basic position keyframes here, pretty straightforward, right? Let's go ahead and ease those, and maybe I'll crunch that just a little bit to kind of give it some, that'll kind of give it some extremes for you to see. Okay, let's make that faster. Just to be a better example. Okay, so we've got this position movement here. Now, as Evan was saying, you could use the posterized time effect, and we could trim the frame rate, the visible frame rate of this. And so we would only see, every 4 frames or something like that, be, similar to what I'm doing clicking through here. But you can use an expression to posterize expressions as well. You can also use that to just posterize a specific property. If you didn't want, let's say for some reason you wanted the position of this layer to animate at 4 frames a second, but you wanted the scale to still run at 24. You could say posterize time 4 and then just type value. And now you're going to still get all of your keyframe values, but it's going to be chunky, right? And then you could indeed still run a different property at 24 or whatever frame rate you want. It's a little weird, although I use this a lot to create kind of like, if I want to give a little bit of a stop motion-y vibe to something, I do utilize this a lot if you don't want to push it on the whole layer, which can have its reasons. But as Evan was describing, if you want to use a wiggle, and then this frequency number, wiggle is frequency and then amplitude. This frequency number doesn't matter as much. You just want it to be bigger than what you're posterizing. So let's say 12,100 here. So it's actually doing all that wiggle, but it's only going to show us, every 4 frames a second here, in addition to the movement that I have. So it's an interesting way. If you want like a poppy wiggle here, this is an easy way to do it.
Now, when you're talking about like, why would I want to posterize this at this frame rate, this at this other frame rate? If anyone has seen the masterpiece that is Into the Spider-Verse, this is a technique that was used specifically on the Spider-Punk character, where different elements of that character are posterized to different levels. So the whole film is in 24, right? That's what it's being projected at. But this character is actually on the 2s. This one's on the 3s. Like this one is anime inspired, so it is at the conventional frame rate of anime. This one is based on like old timey cartoons, so they are going to be posterized down even more. And then you get into someone like the Hobie character, where different elements of him are at different things, which creates an incredibly disjointed vibe to that type of thing, which works out pretty nicely. So hot tips, Kyle. We got hot tips all over the place around here.
All of that being kind of a long way to get to the posterized time 0 that Michael Montoya was referencing. If you plug that into a property, the frame rate is 0, and thus it will never change. And so you could use this on something and then, randomize this or something like that. And it's a way to hold that value.
Yeah.
So if I randomize this, somewhere between, say, 0 and 1,000 or whatever, well, that broke because this is a multi-dimension property, yada, yada, yada. But you can use that as a way to hold a randomized value, or possibly to keep After Effects from calculating so much on something.
And you'll notice, so if you're wondering, is it calculating, is it not, clear your cache, look at the green bar. If the green bar creeps forward, it's evaluating something on every frame. If it just goes blam and it all goes green at once, then it has evaluated all those frames at the same time.
Yeah.
So something to keep in mind if you're trying to performance check these things, and use the snail. Consult the snail if you are ever in crisis. Escargot, yeah. Oscar would like to help you as often as possible.
Right down here at the bottom of your screen, or you can right-click right here and choose Columns Render Time, and then you'll be able to see the actual render time of layers, effects, masks, and expressions.
Yeah, perfect. All right, I gotta get us a Tangent Town graphic for this.
Yeah,
show.
that was a long way to go here. Did you see what a huge difference just adding that expression made? Still not bad, but from 1 millisecond to 119.
Wonderful.
It actually hangs on to that until it's still in there, even though the expression isn't there anymore.
Gotta blast that cache. All right, so Kyle, what are some things that you didn't get to last time that we want to jump on this time?
Yeah, well, ultimately, a lot of this was just a silly reason to talk about this episode, which I will at length if anyone's interested. But one thing I wanted to point out is that on these other rigs, I had actually created, let's see, here we go. This version is rigged. I had actually created in the essential properties. Hello. Maybe this was when I was going to rig in essential properties. I was a little bit of a, where's my stuff? I'm a little lost in which things I rigged in there. Anyway, I had the colors rigged up, was what I was going to say here. Here we go. Pie chart build. Okay, there we go. I found it. I did a bad job of labeling this project because I made 4 things that were all almost the same, and then I made demo versions of those things.
Yeah. Chart 01, chart 02. Oh, I can't believe we can't find anything now.
Right. So this was just set up specifically so that these colors could all be changed. But I did want to show one alternative way to deal with that, especially if you have maybe a variable number of wedges or something. And here, the number of wedges exceeded the colors in our little color theme that we came up for Motion Design Hotline. So instead, I just used black and white for the thing. And so this is full white, full black, and then say, 20% gray, 40% gray, etc. So you could just divide that by however many colors you needed. And then you could, there's a variety of options here, but I just applied the tritone effect between the pink and our blue, and that got us a nice little array of the colors that are in between those. So that can be a little trick. I'm a big fan of working black and white and then applying color via an effect like tint or tritone. But I think the other big thing that we're going to talk about as part of this is these little data labels that I made for this and the other pie chart, because these are all the same pre-comp, but using essential properties to allow them to be different. So let's close down some of these other things. Here's a little hot tip if you have a lot of compositions open. A little hamburger menu on the one that you want to keep. Just click on that and then choose Close Other Timeline Panels.
Hamburger, yum, yum.
Yum, yum. Okay, so this is kind of just a simple little rig here. It's a line that animates out from just behind where that circle would cover it. Let me expose the keyframes here as well. So there we go. It's just a simple little rig where it extends and then the word comes out. But there's a few other things on here, like if you, since I needed this rig to extend around both sides of the circle, if you go around to the other side, it moves to the left.
Flippy floppy.
Yeah, flippity floppity. And there's a couple ways I could have done this. I certainly could have used one text layer and forced its position to the other side, but I actually just used two and then toggled their opacity based on the rotation of this layer. And so this rotation is actually the thing that gets accessed in the other comps, and then the text layer, obviously.
Yeah, because there are like whatever your input is. We're going to say just expression basics. We're going to take the input is rotation. We know that when it crosses a certain threshold, it's going to be this. When it crosses a different threshold, it's going to be that. And then whatever the that is, in this case, not seeing it or seeing it, but it could have been actually accessing the paragraph, like justify right, justify left.
Yeah, or just forcing the position to, regardless of how this text is actually justified, you could say, look at the right edge of this thing, and then go 20 pixels past that, and now this is the anchor point for this text or whatever.
Yeah. And like these are the types of challenges that will confront you when you're building these things, of deciding like which output, which property, and then anyway, that'll be just as an aside to get people's brains thinking.
And I think there's a good point here too, because watch this. So when I push it this direction, when I'm going to go clockwise, that's when it changes. Okay. But if I go back around counterclockwise and push it past, it doesn't work. Because in this particular case, I didn't need this example to do everything. And I kind of set this up a little bit backwards, but it's just because of the rotation goes this way.
Right.
But my graph animates on from this direction. So to get the proper rotations when this is in use, I had to subtract 360 minus, whatever the angle of, let's find this in use here. So each of these has that same property. Here it is, that rotation property is looking at the angle, the wedge that it's tied to. And so it's finding the angle basically of this line and then doing half that. But then as you go, it's, this angle to this angle and half that. So it has to sort of, again, add each one on there so that it places it in the proper spot. But it's really just looking at that same kind of rotation setup that's basically driving the whole chart. So the expressions themselves aren't that complicated. You just have to sort of think through the pieces that you have to work with to arrive at what you need.
Yeah. That is a lot of these things are like swans, graceful above the surface and thrashing madly underneath. It's it's a wild scene sometimes when you crack these bad boys up.
And I thought I would point out that this doesn't work for everything. It worked for this one particular case that I built it to do. Here we are. Because ultimately I built it to make an Instagram promo, and then to, I figured we probably wouldn't even explain this on last week's show, which we didn't.
Yeah.
So you don't need to build everything to do everything. Sometimes things can, as long as they work for what you need it, that's plenty.
And this isn't going to be handed off to somebody else for them to put things in, or you're not going to have to write a little help document about how to use the thing, which is the worst. Things should just be used, and we should be able to understand it from context clues.
But really, in this case, this particular thing is rigged such that when you enter the amounts here, everything is reactive. So you would just have to point someone to this pink layer, and then everything else would work accordingly. So as long as the rig works for what actually needs to get touched,
Yeah.
then
So
it's fine.
I think hopefully that'll help people out with like call outs and stuff like that, that like these frame relative things, we can switch it from one side to the other depending on where things are relative to each other. I think, is there anything else about that you wish you had gotten into last
Um,
time?
I mean, I can go as deep into this as we want to. I think, a degree of it would be kind of rehashing stuff that we covered last week in
Right.
the actual pie chart build. But ultimately, this whole rig is just based on like starting at 0 right here, and then you're adding on to that. And then
Hmm.
each other thing is just kind of adding that angle so that it starts here. But really, everything's just kind of being covered up by the previous ones. So
Right.
it's a little bit of a visual cheat because you can totally get away with that in this chart. Other times you would need to do more math to make everything totally accurate. But
Hmm.
um, if you don't need to do that extra work, then take advantage of other structural things like the way that shape layers work to be able to just layer those wedges on top of each other.
Yeah. All right. Perfect. So I got something that I wanted to show off that
Please do.
we didn't get to. So here's my screen. This is a bar chart that I've been working on as a template. You can see it has a lot of controls on it, right? And I just wanted to talk about sort of generally something about visualizing data that might
Hmm.
be useful for people to think about. So there are obviously some things about like how spaced out the bars are, something stylistic, like how wide the bars themselves are. There's a control for bars in use. I think that's probably an earlier version before I'd fixed some of the oopsies. But these are you basically just are going to be inputting the various data points here on sliders, right? Which is pretty easy. But all graphs would have sort of a scale on them. So if we imagine 0 is down here, you know what? I'll just use some text. We'll say that 0 is down here. And in this case, 100 is what's up at the top. So this is kind of what the graph currently represents, and the data is pretty spread out between them. So if we actually wanted to tell people about something that can be graphed between 0 and 100, I would say this is working out pretty well, right?
Hmm.
This is pretty helpful. But if we get in here now, there's some of these like low numbers, right? Like if some of these low numbers are like a bit higher, maybe everything is actually pretty high like this. So we'll just get these up like that. And this is a very normal representation of data, right? At this point, this is where the ceiling and floor can be useful to think about. So what if we were graphing, Kyle, for example, let's say we were graphing like the number of days that that people are eating pie, and that these
Hmm.
represented like
Right.
years, right? So the years, it would make more sense if this was actually a measure of 365 days,
Hmm.
right? So the top of this should be 365 days of the year. And if we were actually graphing it based on, well, if someone were to do all of it, it would get up there. And now you can see all of the graph just got crushed down
Yeah.
because I've changed the data that the ceiling is.
So it's accurate, but it's a little less visually appealing.
Yeah. So instead, I would say like, whoa, hold on. The best person ever did kind of close to 100. So I'll modify it to be like that. Conversely, the floor, like the data never gets particularly low on this thing. So the floor, no one ever did none. So I might as well bring the floor up to like 35. So now our graph represents between 35 and 100, and these bars are really just telling us about we're taking away the bottom
The boring
chaff.
parts.
Yeah, the part that is the same for all the bars. Now, Kyle, I'm going to get up on my soapbox here for a minute.
Hmm.
Talk about
Getting
data.
sudsy.
Yeah, that's right. Lather up, people. Things are going to get sudsy with Evan. If you wanted to say manipulate statistics as you convey them to people visually, you might do a little something like this, where all of the options now appear pretty much equivalent,
Hmm.
right? these seem like the same thing, but all I've done is drop the floor on them so that the sort of percentage difference between all of the bars is way less noticeable. And if I wanted to seem way more pronounced, I would crank it all the way up like this. The same data is being shown to you. The visual difference is being manipulated so that you think there's a huge difference between this bar and this bar, when in reality, there actually isn't that much of a big difference between them. Or you can squish it the other way. You're going to see this all the time when it comes to Data-Viz, especially in newspapers. There is a skewing of trying to make things visually appealing, accurate, and, represent particularly, well, we can't change what the data is, but I can certainly change.
Right. Change the way it looks. So, for example, would you be so kind, Evan, as to take those two number labels that you created and scale both of those to like 15%?
Yeah. I'll just kind of make it widow.
There you go. See, the numbers are still there. It's perfectly, we presented it. You have all the information. You can draw your own conclusions, folks.
How about, and here's another one. I like this one. I'm just going to go ahead and do this with my numbers. So if I were to switch them, and therefore the low bars are actually the worst ones, and the high bars, this has been used to good effect once. This has been done well only once in the history of graphs, and I think it was shooting fatalities, and like all of the red bars looked like blood dripping down the top of the page, right? That's interesting, right? That's something. However, it was really hard for people to understand the data, right? Because like, whoa, what is that really long one? Is that a good one or a bad one in the context of this article, right? Or, what does that even mean? So I think just be aware that if I could say like a PSA for people, if you're putting data out there, if you're animating stuff with data, like there is accuracy, there is readability, and there is a kind of truthfulness to the representation of it. And ultimately, a producer may come in and say, make it look better, which won't necessarily make it look helpful. It won't be that helpful to understanding the actual data. Labels are critical. Like, if you want to present it accurately, each of these should have a little number on top that are saying what the value is, right?
But that gets cluttery, and especially, in a video, which is how these are typically going to be used, you may not have time to present that much text information to your viewers. And hopefully the voiceover is providing enough context so that this graph seems meaningful. But again, that's you could use this as a way to kind of navigate around some, some accuracy if you want things to appear a certain way.
Yeah, and the other thing is just like, well, I'm gonna chop out some of the data points, right? We're not even gonna show some of the categories, or let's merge categories together to make them larger. My favorite is when people take what's called a Likert scale, which is a 7-point agree or disagree, and they just merge a bunch of them together. Bam, 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 bam. So it's like, a lot of people agree with this. You can't take the people who are mid on a topic and group them in with the agree people.
Well, they didn't disagree.
Yeah, 90% of people don't disagree with them. Most people didn't care. Right.
And then in 6-point font at the bottom, you offer a little disclaimer, and that way it's technically out there, right?
Exactly. And Umacorn, you're right. It is like zooming in on our graph. We're like pinching and skewing and doing that kind of thing. Anyway, Kyle, that was my rant about graph and accuracy, which did not fit with yesterday's proceeding because it was not a technical based instruction.
Right.
However,
I mean, I think I'm glad that we got into that, because there is a lot of, even just, we showed a couple different types of graph, and we focused on the technical build of those, but just even picking out which type of graph is appropriate for certain types of data and certain contexts. If this is part of a longer video and it's only on screen for a few seconds, like that visual read of boop, boop, boop is really the most important thing, and probably like quickly showing, contrast in those values is very important. Yeah. But if this is something that like is being put out there to be watched on a loop as it animates over and over forever, that's very different.
Yeah. Oh, so question coming in the chat. Yes, this is where my mind was going with some of this stuff. So first off,
Yeah.
how do we get the bar to sort of respect those floors and ceilings from a technical level? So that all comes down to a linear expression, which is remapping. It's looking at D for data. So it's actually looking at the data value and remapping the data between the floor and ceiling to new values of 0 to 500, which is the actual physical space or the visible. This isn't physical, it's digital. Anyway, the visible space 0 to 500 pixels, which themselves could be linked up. Like if you wanted the height of the graph to be linked to something, you would not put 500, you would put a variable. So
I think you could easily use linear to, I mean, it would get mathy and it would take some processing, but I think that it wouldn't be too hard for you to pull an average of, or even just look at the maximum top end value and the minimum low end value and tell your floor and ceiling to like be both of those, you know, plus minus 20 or something for a little bit of padding.
yes. So what we would do, and I'm just gonna use a text layer for this, right? So
Yeah.
just so we can hold like, let's call this like, possible floor or whatever, right? Floor question mark. So the number that we would want in here, first off, we need to basically pull in all of our datas into here. So let's just grab
Expressions warning.
yeah. warning. I don't know why I'm saying variable A. That's not going to be helpful. Variable D1, etc. Right. And I'll just pull in like a few of them. Right. So
Yeah.
let's grab D2. And we'll say data 0, 2.
Yeah.
Like
Honestly, if you do 3 points, that's enough to get the point across here.
it's enough. The people cry out, no more, no more. D3. So we have these. And then our output could be, say, the max.
Math.max, right?
Yeah. So we want math dot max. And then in here, we just put an array, right? Like it's just, or is the array? You know what? You're going to find in a minute.
I think you're correct.
D1, D3, and then we'll see. No. I don't think I needed to put it actually in these.
Okay. Yeah.
So this is going to return to us the maximum of those three. So between 1, 2, and 3, what did we have? We had 90, 80, 70. I'm going to put this to 65, and it updates to 80.
Yep.
And then if you want to just put some pad in there, it would be this minus, say, 20, right? And that's going to change that value either way. So your min, your max, your means, your medians, stuff like that. I much prefer to leave the floor and ceiling as static numbers that are not dynamic to the data set, because I like to give people the tools to be a nasty little data
But of course, if you were making this exact chart into a template, you could very easily do some of this work, then use linear to plug into the ceiling and floor in the actual rig that already exists there. Yeah. Again, with a little bit of padding, and that way, every time you updated the spreadsheet that was feeding this or whatever, it could dynamically calculate that, ideally with the ability to also tweak it a little bit manually.
Yeah. You want to create like a bunch of controls, and you just put like for freaks only under here. Right? Like, but anyway, just because keeping it automated is great, except when you need to actually grab a hold of those sliders and make some of those artistic choices with it.
The best expression ever is value.
Right.
Using value plus or value minus. You can do all kinds of crazy dynamic stuff, but if you give yourself the ability to still, using value gives you access to the pre-expression value of this property.
Yeah.
That gives you the ability to still change the slider or even keyframe it, in addition to whatever dynamic stuff is happening.
Yeah, I forget who it was. Someone on Twitter was talking about like how much control they give someone in a template and trying to resist this urge to give them literally every property in the essential properties thing. Like, oh, right. Yeah, that's not for them. That's for me. And I need to hide these things.
Yeah, they get like 3.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a genie. You only get 3. Genie rules, only three. All right, Kyle, what else have you got simmering away over there?
Well, we did have a couple questions.
Oh, yeah.
We put out an Instagram story and solicited a few questions here. So let's just talk through some of these.
Sure.
So one of them from Joseph Sedlak said, "I'm surprised you're not involved more with Cavalry app. Data-Viz in there is more powerful." Well, thing one, this show is usually hosted on Adobe, so that is a big part of the reason. But Cavalry does have all kinds of. It is. I would say it tends to be a little more technical. Obviously, we're pretty deep in the technical side of After Effects today, but Cavalry is indeed a good data viz thing.
Right.
Maybe we'll do a show, one of these pirate feeds on that in the future.
Yeah, so Cavalry?
Cavalry.
Cavalry. So it has a lot of like hooks and properties because you're pointing stuff to stuff dynamically. I don't know. It's like a 2D MoGraph module out of
Basically, yeah.
C4D, right? But Rive, I think also, if you're looking at these types of things, is very
and it is
useful.
Rive is intended to be fully interactive, so or build things that are interactive. So that would be a great place for this stuff. And then Spline is a 3D option with interactivity built into the stuff.
So there are heaps and heaps of things you can be doing. I think one of the reasons that we mostly cover this is because After Effects integrates into people's kind of production pipelines, right?
Yep.
And there's sort of a you'd have to go into Cavalry and then you send the thing out. There's no dynamic way to get that into an NLE for them yet. But this is something you can send off to Premiere, you can send off to other people. That's why it tends to be. Also, that's kind of where we're at. That's what Kyle and I are known for. So, why did you show how to do this in Excel? Same reason.
There you go. You could probably go back to the two shot since we're just kind of chit chatting here.
Well, that's true.
So I had another question from Mr. D. Latif. Have you ever considered somehow using AE to set up live Data-Viz demos? So, I mean, technically, there's no way to do real time live, but yes. I have certainly built mogerts for myself that are then being used in like a live production context.
Right.
So to show something like total money raised at an event that I work on. So it's not hard to set up a motion graphics template for yourself with, one or two simple fields. And as long as you have, 30 seconds notice before the thing needs to be live, you could enter the one or two values that needed to be updated and either run it or even pre-render the thing.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, maybe a lot of people don't know this of Premiere's other functions in the world, that it is sometimes used as the like switcher backend brain for live shows.
Yeah.
To be sending out the to the different monitors around, which are basically projectors or large screens places.
Yeah.
Like there are some like stadiums and stuff that are using Premiere for this type of thing. Or
that's surprising.
Well, yeah. Well, look, they're not great stadiums,
right?
But
it's not really made for that. But you can just full screen your program monitor in Premiere, and so whatever that output is could be fed to a live screen. I've done it.
Yeah. And I think there's also I think there's like a dedicated. There's a way to send it. It does not send to a window, right? It only sends to a monitor, right?
Yeah.
And that's where it's going. So if you do have sort of a live show that you need to do, as long as you pre-render it, that bar goes green, it's going to play good off of the thing.
This is also an interesting time since we're just talking here. Okay. This was a couple years ago, but a friend of mine actually built a game show in Character Animator.
Oh yeah.
Like, built all these little, kind of a traditional game show setup where it had like little things that were revealed at different parts, and you could like change out stuff. But since that has all kinds of these live inputs that you can interact with, and you could, do it with your keyboard or with like a little stream deck or something like that. this was not huge scale, but for something like that where you could just set it up in advance and then kind of change out some of the content and then be able to
Yeah.
use 3 or 4 keys over the course of each little thing,
Yeah. Well,
getting
'cause,
creative
yeah,
with the tools.
yeah, you could do like the Jeopardy board. You could easily do, oh god, does it account for randomization? I guess you can't do Wheel of Fortune with it then. But clearly, like anything
Well,
that
it
was
has
like,
physics, so you
oh
could
yeah,
like you
so you
could you
could.
could probably make a spinnable wheel in there, I bet.
That's true. But yeah, any kind of survey says, bing, it's up there type of
Yeah.
deal. Yeah, that's a wonderful. I don't know. There's so many different ways to like stretch and bend the apps that we have in here to make them do fun and cool stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, what else is in your real questions from real humans?
Um, okay. Well, one of the questions I think is what we touched on already here.
Hmm.
So from Anda Puskas, which maybe is Anda who? I don't know. Maybe they're different Andas. Anda who? This one? I don't know. Not
If two
Data-Viz per
Andas
se.
watch our show,
Yeah. um, Said not Data-Viz per se, but the text next to it. Sort of going on to say generating text in separate pre-comps from a document. So I think that's pretty much what I already showed here.
right?
And if there's more of a question, I can certainly dig into it. But absolutely, for something like labeling data, that's a great use of essential properties.
Hmm.
And if we want, I mean, I could show, the way that you put that together real quick if we
Well, I
want.
was gonna say if we're talking about like a document, like just show, I guess, pulling string from CSV, right? Like it's the same as pulling a value.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know, we know
Yeah.
Kyle screen.
Um, the CSV driven thing is indeed feeding these text labels right
Hmm.
here. So the little label pre-comp that you watched me make a minute ago, and the text field itself that drives this little text layer is one of the things I fed to essential properties. Okay. And then that in this little label pre-comp, um, this label gets expression linked to that CSV. You just open up the little label thing and pick whip it to the appropriate cell, and then it's pulling a text string for key lime, pumpkin, chart, and apple in this case. Those could be whatever text strings you want. So if you can do it with text or numbers, you can feed it through from a spreadsheet or a JSON document. Um,
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Does it? No, it doesn't treat all of it like strings.
Well, so CSV is a comma separated document. So if you were to
Yeah,
look at it in just a text editor, all of your data is just separated by commas.
yeah. I'm just trying to think like if you need like a from string, from value to string type of thing. That's sometimes like that you may encounter a need to convert what it thinks the thing is.
You could,
If
yeah.
that makes sense. It doesn't. It's not always a problem. I don't think I've ever encountered it with the CSV thing. Like it seems to understand. Oh, these are numbers. I'm going to treat it as a value. Oh,
I see.
this
I
is
see what you mean.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever tried to kind of cross that either, but yeah, I mean, you would be able to turn a text string into a value of certain types depending on what it is. You'd have to kind of know what you're doing with it. Like, are you counting the number of characters, for example?
Yeah, because I'm just thinking
Or
of
are you
like
parsing it so that you want to see the fourth character specifically in that text string? You can do that kind of stuff.
yes, you're right. So if you were to use like the slice expression, for example,
Mhm.
you must slice strings. Therefore, even if it were a numerical input, then you would have to convert to string in order to slice it. You or maybe you don't have to. Maybe it just automatically assumes, well, you're slicing, so I'm gonna say it's a string now. Like, and
Slice probably only works on strings. Sorry, we've gone very deep into expression land here, folks. But um,
folks, we're in the jungle.
yeah,
You'll have to trust that we'll take you back. We're not going to leave you there. But hopefully that helps. Let us know, and if that is helpful and useful
yeah. Some of
information.
this stuff kind of only makes sense when you actually are like a little further into this and you realize like, okay, I need to make this thing do
Mm.
this thing.
Ooh,
And then you realize that's the method to do it.
I know what might be helpful. So
Great.
sometimes, let's say, for example, that you have multiple text blocks like in your CSV, but you want to combine them together. Like let's say you had a first name
There you
column,
go. Yeah.
last name column. Could you show people how that would work, right? If you wanted to add like
Yeah.
these things together.
I mean, I'm going to build it with just text layers real quick, but it
Yeah.
would work the same if you're pulling it from something else. So let's just quickly make
Yeah. So
a
regardless of
text
the
layer
source, the source is a string, the other source is a string.
here.
And when we're talking about strings and values, I mean, like sometimes in code, something is considered to be a value, as in a number, but that same series of characters could be called a string, which is generally text or words that are being
Awesome.
typed around, which is also then different from, say, writing in like if you wrote in like to comp or dot to comp parentheses, that's different from if you said quotation mark to comp quotation mark, basically, because that is telling it, hey, this is not this is not a piece of code to interpret. This is just a string to express or to poop out into the world.
Yeah. So I was mostly paying attention to what you were just saying.
That's fine. I was trying to fill time for when the example was more completed.
So I made two different text layers here, Evan and Abrams. They're just basic text layers. And then I have another text layer that's just waiting to get something. So the source text property, which is what you actually, enter stuff in, this can hold all kinds of expressions. And there's even a whole subcategory of expressions that only work in this particular field. And that's a whole other thing for another day. But what Evan's talking about is ultimately text is a string. So it's like a little array that holds all of these characters in it. And you can do different things with those, or you can treat these as whole pieces. So if I wanted this text layer right here to display the contents of these other ones, I can alt click to create an expression. And then let's say I want to do this source text plus this source text. And now it's going to display Evan Abrams. Well, that's almost what I wanted, but I could come in the middle here and say quote space end quote. Anything you put in quotes is just, you're basically kind of hard coding in something. So let's put in 55 here, okay? And then I'll say, so it's pulling that layer that says Evan plus 55 plus that layer that says Abrams. And now once I click out of this, it's going to display exactly that. So instead of 55, yeah, right.
Evan 55 Abrams.
Let's just make that a space. And so you could be pulling from multiple cells in a spreadsheet, like Evan was referencing a minute ago, and you could string it together like this, or in other ways that could be a little more dynamic if you needed to. So you could kind of display multiple things, or you could take a result that was like this and you could slice it up so that you're getting only this gets a little more expression-y, but you could say like take everything until you hit a space and then that's the end. Yes. And so you'd be able to split, if you had a cell that had Evan Abrams in it, you'd be able to split it up into Evan and Abrams on two different text layers if that's something you needed to do.
Yeah, and like that type of splitting and slicing and whatever, like there are codes for the various things. Like what would it understand a space to be? What would it understand like a return to be? There are different forms of space, different forms of return to account for. You can insert if you wanted it to be like Evan on one line, Abrams on another, or you're trying to invert that so it's Abrams Evan type of thing. Like. Anyway, there's a whole lot of interesting operators that you can slip in.
That's a great example. Like if someone gave me all of these as Abrams, Evan, and I needed them to display as Evan Abrams, but I didn't want to go through and manually update 100 lines in a spreadsheet. figuring out the code to take everything, up to the comma, but like you'd have to do a little work setting it up, but then that could potentially be easier than manually changing everything in the spreadsheet.
Yeah, and especially because whatever system is creating the spreadsheet they're probably not going to change that.
Right. You may just have to deal with what it is.
Yeah, you've got to, here is some poopy, make it into gold type of deal, which is pretty common. So being able to say, when you hit a comma, let's break that apart instead, or we'll switch out the comma for a space or whatever it's going to do. Like, really useful if you're thinking about labels. I'm trying to think. Anda's question was talking about pre-comps, I think, right? Or
correct.
So just in terms of like where you reference things, you can point to whatever, you can point to any comp in a project, right? It doesn't
by
matter,
name also.
Yeah, like it doesn't matter where it's nested, how it's nested. You call it by its name, and you will be referencing the thing there. And you can call footage just out of the project as well. So it's all just addresses around in the thing. So don't think that, oh, this thing is not in the composition with me, or it's not a layer next to the other thing. It's totally fine. Like we talked about at the beginning, you could not drag the CSV in at all and just point to the footage item. But Kyle is correct to warn you that it will not be gathered if you collect and reduce your project, it may get thrown in the trash.
Right, which would be bad.
Yeah, because everything would break and you would feel silly.
I think obviously we just threw out sort of a lot of specifics here, but I think the thing I always like to remind people is like, yes, you can get into code here and you can do all kinds of complex stuff, but ultimately what you need to do for any of that is take a step back and think through in plain English what it is you're trying to accomplish. And ultimately that means you can probably Google that, and someone figured it out 15 years ago. And maybe some of your specifics are going to be a little bit different, but and that's when you can start asking people questions. There's lots of people who will be helpful in figuring out the little fine tuning things that you need. But ultimately, if you can't articulate what it is you're trying to accomplish, then you shouldn't be writing any code yet.
Well, I think the big thing is like, let's break down our big complex idea into smaller, manageable, like granular problems. I always hey Wade, what's going on? We're being simulcast right now.
I caught that.
Got thrown in.
That's part of why I went on my little rant there. It felt very aptly timed.
Exactly. Yeah. We want to give people the good stuff when that happens. But yeah, like being able to redefine a problem in terms of inputs and outputs, critical, and then that granular turning complex things into smaller things. I always use the example of like doing a layup in basketball, so then people get confused and think that I can play sports. But that combines dribbling the ball, moving while dribbling, changing,
but not too much.
Yeah. Don't do too much of that. Don't do too much moving and dribbling. But then like changing your weight, jumping. So there's like 6 things that if you break down the layup into these 6 components, then it becomes a lot easier to actually practice and do them, and then eventually string them together into one fluid motion. And then we'll throw in other people trying to block you and stop you from doing that. But that's the general idea, that we want to break our long chains down into smaller, manageable chunks. And I will say that is something that you can take forward with you into life outside of code, right? Like, oh, Kyle, how am I going to get my driver's license renewed? Well, step 1, Evan, you should pay off your parking tickets, right? Like, this is a multi-stage process to doing the complex thing. And then it becomes manageable, and then suddenly you're coping with ADHD, and it's pretty great.
I don't know how to segue from that to what I was going to say, but it's just happening. Yeah, just like this. Sometimes just declaring that a joke exists or or that no segue exists, for example,
Yeah.
is the best way to just handle stuff.
It's called putting the tiger on the tail and yelling at it.
Yep. So I wanted to address Kyle's question, not me, a different Kyle. There's a small club of motion design Kyles, and yes, we all know each other. But he asked, what types of data formats work best with After Effects?
Okay.
Also partnering JSON files with AE, question mark? That's not quite a question, but since it's another Kyle, I'll let it slide. So I just wanted to
go up at the end, and then it's a question.
I wanted to point out, in my opinion, CSV or TSV are the easiest, like most user accessible things to work with. So this is just a Google Doc right here. And this is what's driving this pie chart that you saw a minute ago, okay? So all you have to do from Google Docs here works the same in any other spreadsheet program. You can download or save as either CSV, comma separated values, or TSV, tab separated values. I think in terms of performance and stuff, I think these are equivalent. I don't see why it would be any different. I don't really read these documents, as they are going to be displayed like this. So I don't think it matters too much.
Yeah.
Because when you import it into After Effects, if you're just putting it in your timeline and then sort of open these up so you can pick what things to it, that's all it is. Working with JSON, which is another file type, and you're more likely to get something that has a lot more data to it. Or maybe if you're getting feeds from a website, weather information, or race data that's coming in, or something like that. It's very similar. It's a little less user friendly. Like you're not really just pick whipping to those. It's a little more complex to connect your stuff to it. But when you need something that's a little more dynamically generated, is probably the best way to phrase it, then something like JSON is probably going to be the way to go.
Yeah.
And then just to call this out, there's one more format. So those are the formats that After Effects can take. And then there's one more I'm about to talk about called MG-JSON. But those are the 4 data inputs that you can feed here.
And that, of course, stands for good JSON.
Yeah, it's Motion Graphics JSON, which, as far as I'm aware, only exists from like a couple camera manufacturers. It is what it is. So cameras like GoPros and some of the like DJI drones and things like that, they generate all this data about, from their accelerometers and GPS data and things like that. And you can visualize those. I'm not going to get too into the weeds here. I already talked about this last week, but this is accelerometer data from a GoPro that someone was wearing while they were jogging. So you can do various things with these if you want to visualize that data. It's just a question of what you have and what you want to do with it. As to which one's best, I think it depends on what data you have and what you're trying to do with it.
Mm-hmm. I like this arrow. Like I like anytime there's kind of a weird HUD element that show up on things, or I don't know, if you're trying to do kind of a futuristic overlay of stuff, well,
totally.
Why not just grab the actual data and put it out there, right? Like I think we spend a lot of time, oh well, I'll make this interface element do a lot of random stuff. Like, no, hold on. You can actually just,
if you got it, yeah.
Yeah. Like I really dislike when, let's imagine, for example, the Nostromo is touching down on LV 426 or whatever, and the interfaces in the spaceship are just showing randomly fluctuating things. That's almost never happening in any interface, right? There may be Gaussian or something, or they're referencing real data somewhere,
yeah.
And if you want the data to be populating realistically, just get something that's real. So databases of weather pattern changes, right? That has a flow to it. It seems kind of random, but it has a pattern to it. And as opposed to just numbers flicking all over the place, like nothing. But yeah, like this idea that you can grab accelerometer data, like if you're doing video of skydiving, Well, why don't you
Right. And you
there?
can find, if you Google for MG there's not a ton of examples around because it's pretty technical, but you will find a handful of examples from people who have like used the example of taking a GoPro on a roller coaster or something, and
Hmm.
then put a bunch of little HUD elements so that you can see all those different things. Feel that the G's, the acceleration, how fast they're moving, things like that. Um, Ultimately, it feels like a lot of those things are being used in a more technical sense versus creatively. But if you
Hmm.
have this, you could certainly be using it creatively without having to fudge it, like Evan was just talking about.
Yeah, which kind of goes back to my earlier rant about making data that is accurate, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're putting up HUD elements that are meant to simulate what the thing is like, and you have access to the real thing, why fake the thing when you can just put the real thing up there and link it together? And like you may want to soften the data so you can kind of see that like these accelerometer numbers on Kyle's screen, like they're kind of bouncing all over the place, right?
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
And
Um,
but you could use like a smooth operator on them if you really wanted to.
Yeah, so this is the actual data from the file here, and so you could. I found that in this case, you needed to actually smooth this data property. That's what worked best. So you could smooth that, or you could use a posterized time on this, like we talked about at the beginning of the episode. And so you're only getting it updated maybe 3 times per second instead of getting it every single frame, which is kind of overwhelming. Um, so there are ways to sort of manipulate that. One thing I wanted to call out real quick, just because this comes up a lot, and
Hmm.
people probably do a lot of this stuff the hard way. If you have a number right here, like this accelerometer data, okay, if you have something that you want to see on screen,
Hmm.
did you know that you can literally just drag that up to your up to your viewer, and then obviously adjust the position or whatever, and then you will see it displayed right there. By default, it does set it as a guide layer. It assumes that you don't want to see that. But if you're pulling data for a graph or a chart or something, and you want to see that displayed as part of the readout, just do that instead of creating something and linking it and all that. I mean, that's what it's creating, but it does it for you. And then you could just right click and turn off guide layer. And now you're getting that readout of what those numbers are doing.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's so many little corners that people don't get into. But yeah, like that the ability to like just grab a thing and throw it up. I think the other thing that's helpful is like, oh yeah, that's telling me the address of the information, right? That I want to link to. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's anyway. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Anything else?
I see there's a question here about the smooth function.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't know. Do we want to smooth some data? Do we have?
Uh, I mean, I don't know. We could also just smooth a wiggle or something like that.
Wait, hold on. Can you smooth the wiggle? Let's not overpromise.
I mean, you could generate that in, I mean, you can. Probably
Hold on.
the easiest to explain would be to create one layer that's wiggling a lot in position, and then make a copy of that, tie it to it, but smooth it, and that way you could see both versions.
Yeah, let's see if I can do that here. So let's go ahead
But
and get.
again, these are just numbers, so you can you can smooth anything. I think something like position makes it the most like visually apparent what's happening.
You can smooth anything.
Yeah,
All
just
right.
sand off the edges.
So let's see. Oh yeah, sorry. So let's go random. I guess like that, because that is going to make some very tiny. Hey, update, will you? Hey, update, you jerk. The thing's up in the corner. There it is. Okay. Let's have a number between let's go with 0 and 500, and the other
There you
one
go.
same. Let's get a number between 0 and 500 like that. And I'm just going to go ahead and make a new null, and I'm going to parent this to that. So it's going to be flapping around in this zone,
There
right?
we go.
All right. So
Flapping.
let's have a look at the graph.
Yikes.
uh, so there's that. Let's go ahead and duplicate that. I'll make a second one. Or right. Okay. So let's go ahead. We'll duplicate this. Let's call it its position and scrap it. So let's throw that out. Yeah, but if I parent this to that one, it's I guess they're going to be on top of each other.
Don't parent it.
Right.
Link the position, and then you could smooth that
True.
incoming link.
So we're just going to say var p is this, like that. So yeah, I should be able to do p dot smooth, right? And this should smooth them out. So, I mean, it's still kind of wacky. Let's make this a different color so that we can really totes appreciate what's going on. We're going to appreciate it even more, though, when we actually look at the graph. So,
that's a lot of graph.
Look, there's a lot of graph going on. And I think we're looking at too much graph. So
I think so too.
Look at the one graph. But hopefully you're able to kind of see if I toggle on and off. Oh, no, that's not going to do it. Where's our beautiful little dotted line? That's what I want to see. Oh, right, because there's just so many. Yeah, you can't really tell that there are two lines sort of being represented on here. But I'm just going to go ahead and we are going to kind of press play on this thing. And maybe what could help is I'm going to grab the echo effect. And
there you go.
Try to turn these things into a little bit of a...
Yeah. So Wade's asking, so it's smoothing just what the operator applied. Basically, it's like a lot of these expressions functions, like clamp is maybe a good comparison. You're feeding it something, and then it's doing that function to it. So you're taking whatever input is coming into this, and then it's smoothing it. And you do get the ability to kind of tell it how much you want to smooth it, for example, kind of how many frames it's looking at to determine how much it's filing down those edges.
Yeah, it's the width and the samples is what we get to see. But you can really see quite nicely here. It's literally like averaging the scatter plot down, right? That this is turning into that. There is another smoothing function that you might do to something. So yeah, here's what I'm going to do. So we've got this. We know this is random. Actually, I don't have to delete it. I can just turn its thing off. Anyway, so we've got this, and I believe keyframe assistant. Where's my convert express into keyframes? So we're going to bake this down like that. So we have now baked it. We've bakelized it. So it's the same thing that it was doing on every frame, but now it's keyframes. You could, if you wished, I can remove that because it's not needed anymore because it's still doing the thing. We could look at the position, and what if I put a different expression on here that is just value dot smooth, right? Now, why does it not like this guy? Oh, wait, I don't have to say that. Yeah, there we go. I don't need to say that. Yeah, value dot smooth. So now we should be able to see the graph a little bit nicer, right? This should be helping us out with our graph. There we are.
Okay.
So
yep.
Let's make sure that we are indeed only looking at this particular graph, but you can really see how if we observe a value graph, is that really helping us too much? Hopefully you can see like the dots that are everywhere and then this thicker line here, which is what it's being smoothed down to. So the much more erratic points, right? And then the smooth value.
Yeah, there you go.
Happening in between them. I mean, this really looks like a stock portfolio, so I don't know if that's going to be particularly helpful. But we can now at least observe the line, right? So we could say, let's start putting in a couple extra values. I'm going to say 7,7, and you can see how the line has changed, right? Or 7. I should have adjusted my font size.
I mean, ultimately, this is if you have something like that accelerometer data that we were looking at, and you've got too much of it, and you don't want to have it, sort of a chunky stop motion feel. This is really the answer to that. Yeah. There is, however, and I don't know if honestly I haven't used it for a long time, but there is in your window menu a thing called Smoother.
Yeah.
That does this basically in a little more user-friendly way.
I mean, it's really just going to delete a bunch of keyframes.
Yeah, I think that's what it does.
Also, I think I have way too many keyframes.
Well, yes.
But basically, you set your tolerance, and then it deletes them and tries to ease them and preserves the thing. I don't like to use the smoother for a few reasons. One, this. The other, though, is that
Exhibit A.
the other is that it's destructive, and you
Yeah.
actually lose the information. So you don't get to come back and say, "Oh, I made a mistake. I want to tweak it," right? Or,
Yep.
I have I have changes, givesies, backsies, type of thing. You could always just duplicate the layer and then smooth one of them. And
Yeah.
anyway, I've clearly caused a problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're at the end of the show anyway. We've gone
Yeah.
a good 15 minutes over at this point.
Kyle, here's the problem. I just smoothed 10 minutes of animation. So
Oh, Evan.
anyway, don't do
Don't do that.
Don't do what Evan do. Do what Evan say. And here at the end of the show, we like to say, if you enjoy what you're watching, make sure you subscribe to us and follow us in the different social places. So
Even if you hate it.
yeah, you know what? Hate watch our show. We'd love to bring that kind of energy to us.
We'll take the viewers either way.
Why not? Yeah, I've always wanted a spicier interaction. So let's get a more frictive interaction going over here. We tried unsuccessfully to have fake beef with each other on one program. That didn't work out so well.
Well, it wasn't me. That's right. The one where we ripped each other's faces off.
Exactly. Yeah, that was people can't believe that Evan and Kyle are fighting. So anyway, if you like what you see, even if you don't, we have a YouTube channel, our very own YouTube channel at youtube.com/@motion design hotline, possibly.
We'll say that. I don't know.
Sure.
You'll find it. If you don't find it there, ask us and we'll tell you.
One at a time, individually ask us.
Yep. Or go to the website, motiondesignhotline.com. You can find it there. I know that my Instagram link in bio has, links to these things as well.
Yeah, that was my favorite of your American presidents, Lincoln bio. So
I hate it. I wish we could just use links, but that's a different topic.
Yeah, that's when they try to clone Abraham Lincoln and he comes back as a pile of sentient goo. Lincoln bio. So the Motion Design Hotline project files, download them. Buy some hats, buy some t-shirts, buy our merch. It what does it do, Kyle? I mean, it funds a lot of our
it makes you look awesome. That's what it does.
That's true. Do it for selfish reasons. But yeah, we are here every Monday. So Monday at 4:00 Eastern time, pretty much all the time. So if you've got a Monday coming up and you're watching this in the recording, you could have been here live, but you didn't. You squandered it. So anyway, I guess that's
if you have things that you want to know about After Effects or motion design in general, please let us know. Ask us questions. That is the whole point. We are here to be your After Effects. I don't want to say servants, but we exist to answer. We exist to answer your questions. So send them.
We are nominally, by the conceit of this show, a hotline which you should be calling for your problems.
Ring, ring, hello. Yes, please explain smooth to me. And then we did.
Ring, ring, ring on the telephone. All right, cool. Well, we'll call it there because I'm getting silly. I'm going to shut it down. See you all next week, Kyle. I'll see you next week. And we'll get into more of this stuff.
Yeah, it's nice when we can do this and not feel like we have to cram everything into the last 12 seconds that we have because we explained too much.
Oh no, Sam had a really lengthy question here at
the
end.
That's a great question, Sam. Maybe that's something that we'll answer next week. Because here we are at the end of the show.
Any tips for getting into motion design? Both hands. Use them both. No, the real answer is to start small and always watch Motion Design Hotline.
Indeed.
And especially Sam. If you have specific things that are this thing is really frustrating me or whatever, at EC Abrams, at Kylosaurus Rex, motiondesignhotline.com. See you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Stay
Thanks
creative,
for watching.
Be kind to each other, etc.
Etc.
I still don't remember how to stop the show.